Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming today. Thank you for coming, everybody, to Sizewell. It's wonderful to be here and to see this astonishing plant and to meet the staff and some of the young people who are going to be working here, already are working here. Now, when I was a child, I had a wonderful book, a much-thumbed ladybird book called The Story of Nuclear Power. It was published in 1972, and I used to go through it again and again, and I was enthralled to read how scientists split the atom here in the UK for the first time, and they did it at the Cavendish laboratories in Cambridge, and I noted that the world's first civilian nuclear reactor, the first civilian nuclear power station, was at Calder Hall in Cumbria, now of course Sellafield. And I look back at the optimism that you see on every page of that book, and I look at what has happened since, and at the short-termism of successive British governments and their failure to do justice to our pioneering nuclear history and their abject failure to think of the needs of future generations, above all of the families that are today struggling with the cost of energy in this country. And I feel like one of those beautifully drawn illustrations in that ladybird book of what happens in a nuclear pile when the graphite rods are taken out at the wrong moment and my blood starts to boil and steam comes out of my ears and I think I'm going to melt down. And I ask myself a question, what happened to us? When Sizewell opened in 1966, it was the 8th reactor that this country had built in just 7 years. Why have we never got back to that kind of rhythm? Have we lost the gumption and dynamism of our parents and grandparents? It gets worse. When Sizewell B, fantastic white dome, was completed in 1995, it was the 5th reactor in 7 years. Now remember 1995, an era that was technologically so primitive that people used to use things called car phones and went down to Blockbusters to rent VHS videos. Think of the colossal technical progress in other areas and contrast the paralysis in British nuclear energy. How many new nuclear power stations have we built in the 27 years since? How many have been connected to the grid? How many slices of bread can we toast with the additional nuclear power we've created? How many washing machines can we power? How many families have been helped with extra nuclear energy? The answer is none. Zero. Zilch. The French, who have loads of nuclear power stations already, have built 4 more since 1995, bringing their total reactor fleet up to about 56. The Indians have added about 12. The Chinese more than 50 additional nuclear reactors since 1995. And you know why we failed? It's not even as though we have some cultural aversion to nuclear power. I mean, I just met those nice protesters outside. It wasn't kind of Atomkraft Nein Danke. It wasn't some lefty thing. They seem to be objecting to the disruption to the roads. It's pure NIMBYism out there. That's not the issue. I will diagnose the problem. It's called myopia. It's called short-termism. It's a chronic case of politicians not being able to see beyond the political cycle. For 13 years, the previous Labour government did absolutely nothing to develop this country's nuclear industry. They said it didn't make economic sense. I think they even said that in their manifesto. Well, thanks a bunch, Tony, and thanks a bunch, Gordon. Tell that to British businesses and industries that are now desperately short of affordable and reliable electricity. Tell that to families that are struggling with the cost of heat and light this winter. And they're not the only culprits, because in the run-up to the 2010 election, as you'll have seen, famous video on YouTube now, Nick Clegg, the then leader of the Liberal Democrats, now some kind of tech lobbyist in California, I understand, said that the UK shouldn't build more nuclear power stations like Sizewell C. And he didn't say it was unsafe. He didn't have what he called a theological objection. He said that the problem was that it wouldn't even be completed. Well, no point starting it, he said, because it wouldn't even be completed until, guess when? 2021 or 2022. So, gee, thanks, Nick. And it's because of that kind of myopia that here in the country that first split the atom, we have only 15% of our energy from nuclear and of our electricity from nuclear, and it is falling. Whereas in France it is at 70%, and we ask ourselves why France is more self-reliant than ourselves when it comes to energy, and why they find it relatively easier to hold down costs. Yes, nuclear always looks, when you begin, it always looks relatively expensive to build and to run. But it is, look at what's happening today. Look at the results of Putin's war. It is certainly cheap by comparison with hydrocarbons today. In fact, if Hinkley Point C were already running this year, been delayed for ages and ages, of course, it would be cutting fuel bills by £3 billion. I'll say it again. If Hinkley Point C were running now, it would be cutting our national fuel bills by £3 billion. So you have to look ahead and you have to beware of the false economy. If you have an old kettle that takes ages to boil, it may cost you £20 to replace it. But if you get a new one, you'll save £10 a year for every year on your £10 a year every year on your electricity bill. And I remember when the government finally did the deal on Hinkley C. In fact, I think I was already sitting in the cabinet, and I remember some people protesting then about the strike price that we did, £92.50 per megawatt hour, per kilowatt hour. It was very, very expensive. But it doesn't look very expensive today. That's why we need to pull our national finger out and get on with Sizewell C. That's why we're putting £700 million into the deal, just part of the £1.7 billion of government funding available for developing a large-scale nuclear project to final investment stage, FID, in this Parliament. And in the course of the next few weeks, I am absolutely confident that it will get over the line. And we will get it over the line because it will be absolute madness not to. This project will create tens of thousands of jobs, but it will also power 6 million homes. That is roughly a fifth, 6 million homes, roughly a fifth of all the homes in the UK. So it will help to fix the energy needs, not just of this generation, but of the next. A baby born this year will be getting energy from Sizewell C long, long after she retires. And this new reactor is just a part of our great British nuclear campaign. We will build a reactor a year again. We will build them across the country, at least 8 of them, large ones and small modular reactors. And of course, they're not the entire solution to our energy needs, far from it. Yes, we are increasing our own domestic hydrocarbons. We've got more gas out of the North Sea this year than last year, considerably more, 26% more. We're putting a big bet, as you know, on hydrogen, on carbon capture and storage. And because of the activism of the government, we're now racing towards our target, and we will hit it, of 50 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. 50 gigawatts is a huge amount. I mean, that's roughly half the electricity consumption of this country from offshore wind. And I tell everybody who thinks hydrocarbons are the only answer, we should, get fracking and all that. Offshore wind is now the cheapest form of electricity in this country. Offshore wind is 9 times cheaper than gas. I'll say it again. Offshore wind is now 9 times cheaper than gas because of the insanity of what Putin has done. And that's why it makes sense for us to become more self-reliant. And of course, it's entirely clean and green. So renewables are not only helping us to defeat climate change, they're also helping to keep bills lower now than they would otherwise be in this crisis. What Putin has done is to launch a kind of kamikaze attack on the world economy. He doesn't care how much pain Russia suffers. He believes that ultimately we will flinch, that Western politicians don't have the stomach for the fight. He believes that we will give up on Ukraine, give in to his aggression, and go back to mainlining his hydrocarbons. And I have to tell you, he is wrong. He's wrong in his assumption about the British people. I think he's wrong in his assumption about other European governments too, by the way. I talked to Olaf Scholz last night, and it's absolutely clear that Germany is resolute in moving away from dependence on Russia. And Putin, in this strategy, is going to fail. So we're helping people now with the cost of living, and of course there will be more cash to come. Whoever takes over from me in the months ahead. Substantial sums, that's absolutely clear. But even more important than that, our British energy security strategy, identifying the chronic mistakes of the past, taking the long-term decisions that this country needs. And I would say, frankly, folks, over the last 3 years that this government has done some pretty difficult things, and we've done some of the hardest tasks that you can set politicians. We fixed our relations with the European Union. We settled that argument pretty conclusively. We got Brexit done and took back control of our lawmaking, even though we knew it would not be easy. We opened up our economy post-COVID faster than any other major country because of the speed of our vaccine rollout. We led the whole of Europe in helping the Ukrainians and in standing up to Putin, in seeing the wisdom from the start, in arming them and assisting them. And at every stage in the last 3 years, and I hope I can say this, given this one will be one of my last speeches in this office. At every stage, what we've tried to do is put in the things that this country will need for the long term, to try to look at what future generations will need for their prosperity, their productivity, and for their quality of life, and to reduce the cost of living as well. So whether that's gigabit broadband gone up from 7% penetration to 70% of premises now, 3 new high-speed rail lines, investing massively in this country's ability to make its own vaccines, fixing social care, coming up with a solution for that problem. I think it'd be fair to say this government has not shirked the big decisions. We've raised our eyes, we've looked to the horizon. And I just say, whoever follows me next week, I know that they will do the same. So no more national myopia, no more short-termism. Let's think about the future. Let's think about our kids and our grandchildren, about the next generation. And so I say to you, with the prophetic candor and clarity of one who is about to hand over the torch of office, I say go nuclear and go large and go with Sizewell C. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Right, thank you all very much. And listen, we're going to take some questions from our friends in the media. We've got Andy Bell from Channel 5, who I've just seen in the second row.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Andy Bell, 5 News. You just said that substantial sums will be coming for helping people with their energy bills. A lot of people will be looking at what you've announced today and saying that's not going to help me in the short term, but you've said substantial sums will be coming. Is that just wishful thinking on your part, or have you discussed it with either the people who may be your successor? And would you like to take this opportunity to say, whoever might follow you, you must go ahead and offer targeted, real help to people?
Very much. I know that you'll have heard this, but it is vital that people remember that more money is coming anyway over the next few weeks and months. So by October, you're going to have another £650 going to 8 million vulnerable households. By the autumn, 29 million homes, that's virtually every home in the country, will get £400 to help with the costs of energy. Every pensioner is going to get £300. Everybody that receives disability benefit, and that's about 1 in 10 of us now, is going to get another £150. So there are chunks of money that are going to keep arriving in people's bank accounts. But what is clear from what both candidates have been saying is that come the new administration, there is going to be a further package that is going to be announced. And clearly, we have the fiscal firepower to sort it out. And one of the reasons for that is because, in spite of the difficulties that we've had, particularly in spite of COVID, we do have a robust employment situation. We have the revenues coming in to the exchequer that will enable us to help people. We've got unemployment down to about 3.8%, which is really pretty low. We talk about Britain in the 1970s. It hasn't been as low as that since I was a kid. And that gives us the strength to continue to support people. But what I'm trying to say today is we've got to do that, but we've also got to look at the medium and the long term. And that's where we failed as a country. We've got to be absolutely brutally honest with ourselves. And now is the time, not just to put in the wind and all the other renewables, not just to do the hydrocarbons, but to remember the vital importance of nuclear in the baseload. And the Great British Nuclear Strategy will take us back up to at least 25% of our electricity coming from nuclear. It's got to be done, and that's the. I know that the next leader, whoever he or she may be, will also want to deliver that as well. Camilla Turner, Telegraph.
We know the COVID inquiry is coming up, which may well define your legacy. When you look at the excess deaths, the problems that children are facing in schools, and the delays in our justice system, do you think enough attention was paid to the trade-offs of lockdown? And looking back, would you do the second lockdown again?
Yeah, Camilla, I just think it's very important when people look at this, and I've read some of the commentary that's appeared in your distinguished pages on this matter. It is very, very important for people to remember what the measures to restrict the transmission of COVID were trying to do. We had at the peak of the pandemic, we had about 40,000 people or more in NHS. And we knew that if you had another 20,000, 30,000 more, and it could easily have happened mathematically in the NHS, the system would have been overwhelmed. And what would have happened then is that all those cases that you've just mentioned, all those people who didn't get the help that they wanted with their cardiac concerns, with their cancer diagnosis, all those other health conditions that you've just described, they would have been pushed out even further to the right. And people would have got, the NHS would have been in an even worse position now to deliver the help that's required. So what the government is doing instead is mounting a massive campaign to cut the COVID backlogs. We're putting in all the 100 community diagnostic hubs. We're investing hugely in the NHS now to help people get the treatment that they need. I appreciate that delays in A&E are very severe, and the ambulances are backing up, but that's why we're funding the reforms of social care. That's why we're trying to help people get out of the acute sector and into the place where they can be treated better. But I just come back to, I think there's a sort of inversion of logic going on. People are now saying too much lockdown caused the current problems in the NHS. I'm afraid to say that the opposite is the case, in the sense that if we hadn't locked down, if we hadn't tried to prevent the spread of disease, then the problems we're facing now in the NHS would be even worse. And I really urge people just to think about the logic of what they're saying. Natasha Clark, The Sun.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'd just love to know what your advice might be to the millions of Brits that are going to be struggling with their energy bills this winter. What should they be doing? Should they be turning down the heating, putting on a jumper? Is there anything words of comfort you might wish to say in your last final moments as Prime Minister? And we'd love to know, do you have any regrets about your time in office?
Yeah, okay. Natasha, so look, on the second thing, I'm going to leave that to you, because I'm sure I'm sure that you won't. I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure that younger, fitter, more active journalists than me can readily uncover a couple of things that you might think we got wrong if you really put your minds to it. But I think on the whole, I'm very proud of a lot of the things we did. I think that we had some very tough things to deal with, and I think on the whole, the country's come through them very well. We have now, to get to your point, of course, families up and down this country are going to face a very tough winter, and we just have to accept that. And I think that what I would say to people is that the government really, really understands the difficulties that you are facing. We totally get it. I want to go back to the things I said to Andy about the measures we have in place to reassure people that more is coming, that we're on your side, we're going to do everything we can to help. But also, I think what I would like to get over to people is the sense of the future that is going to be better once we become more nationally self-reliant, once we have a British energy security strategy in place that delivers long-term sustainable electricity, energy for our people. And that is ultimately how to fix this problem. So I think what I would say to people is, look, I know it's going to be tough, and I'm sorry it's going to be tough, but once we're through it, we'll be in a much better state. And out of this catastrophe of Putin's war, I think good is going to come, in that Europe will wean itself off Russian hydrocarbons. We will no longer be vulnerable to his blackmail. And in this country, we will have greatly accelerated long overdue reforms and steps to become energy independent, in particular by rectifying the damage we've done to our nuclear industry. Sam Lister Express.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Given that you mentioned in your speech about the decisions that haven't been taken on energy, do you regret not developing fracking more enthusiastically? Obviously, the moratorium, there was a moratorium on fracking, which you seem to soften on recently. And also, given it is your last few days in office, David Cameron disappeared quite quickly and has remained very low profile. Theresa May is an assiduous backbencher. What kind of ex-Prime Minister should we expect you to be?
Sam, look, I mean, look, on the second thing, I mean, I think only time will tell is my answer on that one. But look, my intention, and what I certainly will do, is give my full and unqualified support to whoever takes over from me, and otherwise, really to get on with life. But on fracking, I'm not intellectually, morally opposed to this at all. I think that if we could frack effectively and cheaply in this country, that would be a possibly a very beneficial thing. I'm just, I have to say, slightly dubious that it will prove to be a panacea, and that's all I would say. I would much rather that we focused on the things where we are brilliant and where the environmental damage is really minimal, like offshore wind. I mean, did you pick up just now? Can I ask you if you can remember how much cheaper is offshore wind than gas? 9 times cheaper. So I kind of rest my case. We are brilliant at offshore wind. We need to put in sustainable baseload in the form of nuclear. Of course, we need a diversified policy, and where local communities want different solutions, they should be allowed to go for different solutions. But I don't think that that particular solution is going to be the panacea that some people suggest. We can be flexible, but we shouldn't put all our eggs in that particular basket. Antonello Guerrera, La Repubblica.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Speaking about nuclear power, how much concerned are you about what is going on around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant in Ukraine, and how close is the risk of a nuclear catastrophe? And secondly, still about Ukraine, as you mentioned the topic in your speech, we are seeing a counter-offensive of Ukrainians starting for Kherson. Do you assume this might be realistically a turning point to regain Crimea and other occupied Russian territories and push Russia out of Ukraine? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Antonello. Look, first on Zaporizhzhia, I think it's very important to understand this is a huge plant, and it delivers a large proportion of Ukraine's electricity supply. I think it's entirely legitimate of the Ukrainian government to want to take it back in as an effective a way as they can from Russian control. But it's clearly the objective of the Russians, about which they're absolutely, I think, explicit, is they want to unplug it from the Ukrainian grid and plug it into the Russian grid. And there are much greater nuclear experts than me in this room. I'm told that has all sorts of risks. Doing something like that, we don't want to take any risk with Zaporizhzhia. I think it's important that Mr. Grossi and the IAEA are allowed to get in and do their inspection. But I've got to tell you, I think that Zaporizhia is a Ukrainian plant, and the Ukrainians should have it back in their control. And on your point about what's happening in the south, in Kherson, everybody should not minimize what the Ukrainians have already done. It is astonishing what they have done. They have repelled the Russians from Kiev. They've driven them out of huge tracts of territory that the Russians had occupied. The Russians are making absolutely glacial progress insofar as they're making any progress at all. They are not winning, and they are not going to win. And that is the crucial thing. Whatever happens in Kherson or in the Donbass, it's vital that we, friends of Ukraine, in the UK or in other parts of Europe, stay absolutely rock solid, steadfast in our support for the Ukrainians. So we shouldn't allow our support to be in any way conditional on what happens in Kherson. Though obviously, I hope and pray that the Ukrainians are successful in what they're doing. It's their country, and as I've said many times, I've never seen a clearer case of right and wrong. They have an absolute right to defend it and to expel the Russians from the territories that they've occupied. Andrew Sinclair, BBC East.
Prime Minister, many people will welcome the commitment you've given to Sizewell today. But do you accept that when it comes to promoting nuclear and wind, there are also many people who worry that your legacy for this part of the country will be to completely change it with dozens of new substations and lots of pylons cluttering up the countryside? Is this the price East Anglia has to pay?
Well, thank you, Andrew. And I know that I could see your wonderful local MP, Tiz Coffey, in the front row, who's good enough and diligent enough. She's mentioned all this to me herself, even though she's a strong supporter of what the government is doing. Clearly, we've got to make sure we do this sensitively. And I saw the protesters outside. I disagree with them. I think they're wrong. I think that the disruption that they're going to experience, it will be short, and it will be worth it for the country. Worth it. Think of those 6 million homes that are going to have electricity as a result of this incredible project. Think of the difference it will make to people in this country. And when it comes to East Anglia's position in offshore wind, it's formidable, and it will. Yes, we've got to make sure that we bring the cables ashore in a way that is environmentally friendly and all the rest of it. But it will drive high-wage, high-skilled jobs here in this part of the country, as well as being part of a clean, green future for this country. So I would be very surprised if the majority of people actually didn't strongly support this approach. So I appreciate there's always going to be dissent, and there's always going to be objectors. That's the nature of democratic politics, as I've discovered. Thank you all very much. Thank you.